Hello everyone, it's just past high noon here in downtown Hutchinson, and we are here for another episode of Changemaker Chats, Hutchinson Community Foundation's monthly web series highlighting the collaborators and innovators hard at work in Reno County, exercising leadership in the gap on our community's daunting challenges and greatest opportunities, and helping us move toward a more connected, resilient, and thriving community. If you would like to catch past episodes of Changemaker Chats, you can find them on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page. Hey. I am Wendy Skellinger, a Communications Officer here at Hutchinson Community Foundation, and today I'm joined by two people working together on a relatively new program in the community, the Crisis Response Team. To my left is Hutchinson Police Officer Jesyka Boots, and on my right is Melody Wagler with Horizons Mental Health Center. Officer Boots is originally from Arizona and has worked with the police department since November 2021 and has recently moved to the Crisis Response Team. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Melody is a lifetime Reno County resident and a social worker and an addictions counselor, and her work with Horizons began in 2016, and she has worked as a co-responder, with the Crisis Response Team since January. I should also mention at this point, if you're hearing some whimpering on the camera, we actually have maybe the most important member of the Crisis Response Team with us. You can't see him right now, but Officer Stitch, the K-9 response officer, is here with us, and we'll try to get a shot of him. So Melody, I want to start with you. As I said, it's kind of a new program in the community. 2021 is, I believe, is when it started. So if you wouldn't mind, just give us some background on when and how the team got started and what it does and what your role is.
Sure. So I think in mid-2021, the Horizons started asking for a co-responder therapist and co-responder case manager. And they had somebody in those positions for a while. And then I think about the end of 2021, it moved over to include an HPD officer, and at that time it was with a case manager from Horizons also. And then, so that was working in tandem with the Crisis Response Team officer, which is now Officer Boots, and they kept that up for a while, and then within the past year, we didn't anymore have somebody from Horizons, so the Crisis Response Team officer was kind of going it on their own, and then I joined the team in January as the therapist to go along and do screens in the community, safety plans, etc. So, and meet with people in crisis and just help. I think, just help in whatever way we can. I think one of the biggest things is really follow up after the crisis. So we'll help de-escalate people in crisis, but it's really the follow-up to me is a really important piece.
So Officer Boots, how would you describe your role with the team?
So I'm obviously the officer. So in a crisis situation, you never really know what you're going to walk into when you go into a scene, and it could very well be unsafe, and that's kind of my role, is to provide safety for all of the co-responders we have with us. But also I have not nearly as much training as Melody does, but I have some training in mental health myself. So when there's not somebody there, I can still intervene and provide resources and do essentially what I can. So it's not just kind of no one being there.
Okay.
And I will say, I just noticed so much. Officer Boots is excellent at connecting with people and helping to escalate in those crisis moments. So, I really think you're excellent at that. So, there's that.
Well, I know we can't probably use the word typical. You said, every situation is different, but when we talk about crisis, just so people can better understand what exactly you generally may be facing, what does that mean when you go out into the field? What does a crisis situation kind of look like?
Could be many different things. So, of course, if we get a welfare check to go meet with somebody who is experiencing suicidal ideation, that of course it could be a crisis response team thing, and as well as could be. We've discussed, if a kiddo is at school during the school year, would that make sense for us to respond? We just look like this. Of course, I'm not going to wear an officer's uniform, but also Officer Boots is just looking like this, just to be very much not kind of just more approachable in a way.
Yeah.
So those types of things. You've had some great ideas of other people we can follow up with.
Yeah, we've recently started expanding what the team does. So my goal is to start going out to some calls that officers have going on themselves that I feel like could use a less, I don't want to say uniformed presence. Like sometimes when officers show up and they're in their full uniform, it's kind of intimidating, so like situations like death notifications, or if a family member has lost somebody, then you just need somebody to talk to in those situations. We're kind of trying to expand in that way.
So you are plainclothes.
I am, yes, this is my full uniform, so I'm more approachable. It's not as intimidating in those situations.
Well, so I'll ask you both. What draws you to this work? Why run into crisis when many people would just run away?
For me, well, I think the aspect of community work is probably my biggest draw across the board. Like that's just my bent. I think long before I went into social work. But I also really, really love crisis work. Because you can see pretty dramatic shifts in how people change. And there's that old adage: don't make big choices when you're in a crisis moment. But I remember my favorite professor ever said, it's actually the opposite, because people actually tend to exponentially change for the better in those crisis moments, right? Because who wouldn't want to get out of that? So I think you can see pretty swift changes, and being able to have that reward of seeing people come out of there pretty quickly is something that I really, really enjoy about crisis work.
I've been studying mental health since high school, and then when I got into the police department, it kind of switched a little bit. So it's obviously I didn't go into the same field that Melody did. My goal was to help people when I started in this field, and when you're in a crisis situation, you're one of the people who are needing help, and oftentimes it's the help you get isn't what you're needing. So I kind of got drawn in with the goal of diverting cases that didn't need to result in people ending up in jail because they were having a crisis.
You both come from different disciplines and professions, and they share some similarities. And I'm curious, as this is undoubtedly a collaborative effort that you're involved in, what is your shared purpose? What have you found to be your shared purpose in doing this work together? What does your relationship look like? How do you build trust as a team?
So, I think it's just making sure we communicate about anything that comes up. If I have questions, I'll process with my supervisors at Horizons, and Jessica's been there when I've done that. And so including kind of our other agency, and then I'll, go along and ask questions also of others at the police department. I think that's a huge thing. And then also just being kind of clear, like, I'm under HIPAA, which is really strict about privacy. So that's kind of it's a thing, but and I can't share certain things, but working through that and just making clear up front this is like, there are things that I can't share, stuff like that. Just open communication, and then just talking through what we can and can't do.
Communication is key.
I
Do you
mean,
agree?
I see. I hear it's a thing.
No, we work fairly well together, bouncing off ideas back and forth, deciding kind of what our course of action is going to be on certain calls together, whether it's deemed safe enough for Melody to go into the scene immediately, if she needs to wait for people to clear out the scene a little bit first. And Melody has fantastic resources throughout the community that really help, because some people, they don't want help immediately. They prefer to go about on their own when they're not under all the pressure from a whole bunch of strangers showing up and trying to help them.
How does it work specifically? For instance, are there certain times a day where people tend to be more in crisis? Let's just start there.
There very well could be, but crisis happens at any point throughout the day. There's no really exact time period in which it happens. Our hours are as they are because there's less resources available in the community during the time that we work. So I work 2 to midnight. During that time, there's less places open. There's less just resources in general. So that's why our team works those hours, not necessarily because there's more crises during that time, but just because it's more beneficial to the community for us to work at those times.
So I'm just kind of laughing because we've ended up being, we've had some late calls, some very late calls this last week, which let's knock on all the wood that doesn't happen again. But yeah, it can happen anytime. We do have some limits. I really like being available later, but then also we have some limits as far as who we can, if we need to reach out to other resources. If we're there 2 to midnight, we can't do it as much. If it's more a contact them in the morning type of thing.
Well, so are you then on a 2 to midnight schedule as well, or
So yes, we go together when I'm at the police department. So we're always together. I'm only there 2 days though, then we have other co-responders who are there, and I don't know if you want to share. I can share about the history of them coming on board. So Tuesday and Thursdays is when I'm there at HPD, and then I'll do just other things at Horizons and elsewhere in the community on my other 2 days. But those are my 2 crisis response team days, is Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Yeah, and then we have other community groups who ride along with me. So the typical crisis response team works Tuesday through Friday. I work all of those shifts, 2 to midnight each day. And then Melody's there Tuesdays and Thursdays. Wednesdays we have a co-responder from Bright House on, and on Fridays we have a private practice therapist who rides along with us.
Are there other officers from the police department working
I
on
am
this
the
team?
only officer.
So, well, how often would you say are your services needed? Is it weekly or is it monthly, whatever the better metric or benchmark there is, but say per week, what have you kind of observed?
Well, our call volume's been very increasing. I've only been on the team for a couple months, but since then it's because of the way that we're trying to add more events that we go out to. We've started increasing them, but there's no guarantee that each day is going to look the same or each week's going to look the same. Certain people may ask for us to call in and check on them later or the next day, maybe even next week. So our call volume really depends on that too.
And we've actually, we might go to 10, 11, do 10, 11 different things a day. So can be, some days are really, really
That's
busy.
That's a busy day. Yeah.
And other days, maybe a little more downtime, but can tend to be pretty busy, actually. So
you're finding certainly that there's the need.
Yeah,
is there.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
In the community. So when you meet someone in crisis, what are the challenges to helping people that you found?
I would say And I don't think this is just crisis at all. Like, this is just a thing that I've always told clients from the beginning of time, is there are never enough resources or the perfect resources that you want. And just naming, like, I just want to name that sucks and I wish that were different. And just naming that difficulty, and also, like, to me it's a beautiful gift to be able to walk alongside people in that difficulty and just help them, like, okay, so there's not the perfect resource, what about this resource, or just sharing that. The sometimes if you're talking more a crisis with homelessness, no, that's a huge resource deficit, I would say. But that can be like just never enough resources, I think, or never the perfect resource, but then also just walking alongside people and just being with them, and, you know, it's not perfect, and what can we do to problem solve outside of that?
Well, so do you see, what do you see going on in the community to address some of those challenges that you know, are there things going on that can help fill those gaps that you're observing?
So I think with United Way and having somebody at the library, that's a huge benefit. And one of my favorite things about that program is that from what I know, and I don't run it, so I'm just speaking, but like they don't necessarily have their own funding to give to people, or their own funding really, but can help connect people and address, like, in the moment, like, let's connect you with this resource, and help them and empower them to do their own outreach, as well as if they need assistance to do those. So some of those types of things are addressing it, like the nonprofit partners meeting. That's something where I really learned about a lot of resources and got more connected. That helped so much with my to connect people with community resources, to meet with other partners in the community. So I think that's something that's really extremely helpful to me. I don't know what you would add.
Well, and you're talking about the care coordinator role that recently launched.
Yes.
It's a United Way
yeah,
of Reno County supported role, and it recently launched, and it's housed at the Hutchinson Public Library, and it's a person who is staffed at the library in a place where people can go who may need resources, or they just need help navigating, you know, where to go first or what to do first, and that person can be there to walk alongside them to try to find the right things that they need, and that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I know I've noticed that there can be so many resources that we have, but there's always going to be somebody who just doesn't quite fit in, and there's steps being made to fit in all those little gaps. But if you don't know of them because they haven't come to reach out for help yet, then it's really hard when they first do. But also, if a person's not wanting help at that time, there's not a whole lot we can do. We can't force them to be willing to go to resources or to talk to anybody, which is part of the reason why we do so much follow-up with people, is because when they're out of that crisis, they may be more open to listening to the resources that we have.
There's been a lot of talk at various levels in the community about the downtown unhoused population. And I think that you both have a unique perspective because you're at this street level or maybe even sidewalk level view of that, whereas some of us are at a further away range. So how would you describe the downtown unhoused population?
So, well, and I'm not sure, like, I think there are all kinds of different, and this is something that other community partners have kind of identified, that like you'll have the people who choose to be unhoused, and then you'll have people with mental health symptoms or issues, and then you'll have people with substance misuse issues, or maybe physical health issues, different things. And it's exactly what you talked about, like connecting them, like kind of threading the needle, like where is the resource that will fit you and your specific needs, with all those different kind of people fitting into those different places.
That's definitely one of those situations in which sometimes there's just not the right resource, just because there's such a gap in between. Because there's resources for mental health and there's resources for substance abuse, but what do you do when you have someone who doesn't have a mental illness but has an injury? And you can't help in that situation depending on the injury because there's just not a resource for it. One of the things we witnessed is like traumatic brain injuries. There's not a whole lot that works. There may be some for an injury itself, but not in connection with the mental illness if you have gone on top of it, or just the right resource that combines together with any situation is not always there.
So one of the things I'm hearing, and kind of a theme that I'm starting to hear, is that there's just not always the right thing for the right situation. And that's kind of come forth in a lot of what you've already said. Do you think it's a matter of maybe there just isn't, and it's just kind of that muddy gray area, or we haven't stumbled upon or supported things that could work?
So I absolutely believe, and I think it's being worked on in the community, to look at some of these issues. I do think it's probably a broader structural issue to address some of those things, but there's not I don't believe in just, like, it's just not going to happen, but I do think addressing it is going to happen, but it'll take all the players at the table too to kind of make it work and all of that, so yeah.
So there are things that you feel like we could be doing, we just...
Yeah, and it's so much, there's so much, like, what's helpful, like, you'll have to address the concerns of, like, people who are not unhoused. Is it, are they going to feel comfortable if there are people downtown or at the library, those types of, like, so many nuanced pieces to address all of it's like fitting a puzzle together. And but I think people are working on all these things to address that. One of the things, we're doing outreaches, and if there's one piece in the puzzle that I think maybe that's even, to me, one of the more important pieces from all of this, of what we do, is building relationship. So we're working on outreaches to people who are unhoused, and just building that relationship. So maybe today you're like, well, I absolutely, and I'll say, you don't have to talk to me. I don't want to have anything to do with Horizons, but we'll keep reaching out, and maybe tomorrow it'll be different, and that's okay. And it's okay if today is not that day to reach out to. So I think, to me, the relationship building piece is, that's my favorite piece in the puzzle, at least.
Relationships are key too.
Yeah, I think they're kind of
hear that a
important.
lot. One of the other things that I think is certainly key for us here at the Community Foundation, we're big supporters of, is experimentation, and that spirit of experimentation, which we know, allowing that space to just try things, and if it doesn't work, then that's okay. We learn from that and we move on. What are you experimenting with, and what are you learning?
Well, one of the things that we were kind of experimenting with Rob earlier, and that would be our therapy canine. He's relatively new to the department. He's only been here for roughly a year.
And this is Officer Stitch, right?
Yeah, this is Officer Stitch. But he's only been here for just about a year now, and just learning what kind of calls he's actually useful on. Because there's some situations where he's not helpful, but there's others where he may be the only way to connect with somebody enough, or pull them out of a crisis to get them to open up and talk to you enough to actually understand what's going on. So that's one of the things that we're doing, but we've recently started doing the daily check-in logs. So if somebody's experiencing a crisis and they're not sure if it's going to continue on for a long period, we call them every day until they no longer require us to. just to check in, see how they're doing, if there's anything that they need today, anything like that.
That's definitely what piece you were talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So what would be helpful to help spur more learning and more progress in what you're doing?
Obviously, more training. You can never go to enough training, learn enough resources. I mean, it's constantly growing. Knowledge is constantly changing, especially in a situation like this where those gaps we had mentioned may be starting to fill in, and we just don't know it yet because it hasn't fallen down the ladder to reach us. Like, we have to reach out and look for it. We also constantly are changing our resources, so we have a booklet that Melody will know a little more about, but it contains all sorts of resources for the community.
Well, you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, well, there's a Head Start has basically all the Reno County resources, and that's something, if it's possible to get that out to more people, and especially in people in those moments of crisis, that's something I would love. Kind of have a crisis/resource follow-up kit with one of our flyers that has some resources on it, the bigger booklet possibly with the bigger community resources, and then I'm also doing a booklet which I did through the college before with COVID funding, which was the community seemed to really appreciate, of photos of the mental health and addictions counselors and about them, and what are their eligibility or their criteria, things like that, and insurance, which is kind of helpful for matching people up with when they need to talk to someone in therapy. So, having a resource crisis follow-up kit, I think, would be and it'd be a great doorway to have people have that after the fact too. So
Great. Well, to help you give you further progress, and for all of you who are watching, we have created a Giving Together grant opportunity intended to give the gift of time and space and to enhance collaboration and continued experimentation, and to help you with some of those things that you just talked about. If you would like to contribute, please visit hutchcf.org. Look for the Donate Online button at the top right of the homepage and click on the Giving Together tab, where you will see a description of what we just talked about and of this grant and a chance to then give. How will both of you know when we have created a more connected, resilient, and thriving community for all people here in Reno County?
Well, when you go out in the field and you have somebody mention, they're like, "Oh, we've heard of you before. We just don't know how to contact you," or any of that. That's something I think would kind of indicate that people are getting the word around, that we're actually out there and we're helping and we're useful, as if more people know that we exist. It's kind of a smaller part of the police department, because there's only one of me, so it's hard to get out there and get the word out to everybody about what's going on.
yes, I love that, and I think too that as we see people who were in that moment of crisis, then when they taper off from needing us to contact them every day, or maybe it really tapers off, like that's to me that's a sign that they're on that road to being more connected. And if we can physically connect them with other resources also, that's phenomenal, and then thriving from there. I think that's one of the reasons why we do what we do.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you both again for being here today, and it's been a real treat, I just want to say, and Officer Stitch. So until next time, intentionally make connections, stay curious, and keep open to what more is possible when we work together for the future of Reno County.